Hi, everyone. It's Lindsay Baker with the Action Hour, and I'm here today for a very important show. I'm here with Greg Downer. Craig.
Yeah, Craig, please.
Craig, what is going on? They're rounding up horses. Yesterday, 100, the day before, 100. They are going against the public will. You wrote, I am quoting you, the roundup removal and administration of fertility control to the Onaqui wild horses. In right now it's going on. It says July 20, because you've been warning them, is not based on sound scientific principles and does not support a long-term viable and ecologically integrated wild horse population. And this is going on as we speak. How does this happen? How does this happen when the public puts out such an outcry? Why is this going on, Craig?
Well, I think the wild horse and burro enemies are getting their way. And during the last Congress, they passed a mean-spirited plan called a path forward, which is actually a path backward, which will greatly reduce the herds and the herd sizes to genetically non-viable levels. So that's why I'm calling for a moratorium on all the roundups. And I urge you to contact the Secretary of Interior and the President of the United States, because this plan is in great defiance of the true and core intent of the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burros Act that should be celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, rather than having to deal with the subversion of its true intent.
Yes, let me jump in right here. So that was the Wild and Free Roaming Horses and Burro Act that was initiated in the 70s, correct?
Yeah, 1971. It was passed unanimously, and it says that the lands on the BLM and the Forest Service shall be devoted principally to the welfare and benefit of the wild horse and burros. It doesn't say to the welfare and benefit of sheep and cattle ranchers or mining companies or energy developers or other forms of use of the public land. So we really have to cry out. This is a general public issue, and it's a quality of life issue. And these are deeply rooted native species that trace their presence back here for millions of years through a real distinguished evolution. And they contribute very positively, and they're needed for balance because they're not ruminant, they're not cloven-hoofed ruminants. We need diversity. And it's so true, it says in the law, they contribute to the diversity of life forms in the nation, and that couldn't be truer. And they're really needed for balance, and they restore soil, seed plants, and they prevent catastrophic wildfires.
Right, and we're going to go through each of those points, so I don't want you to get too deeply into it. Let's unpack it from the top down.
Yeah,
okay?
I just wanted to get them out to begin with.
Yeah, that's great. But let's start at the beginning. Why is there this conflict? So people know, and when they call, they know what they're calling about. Why is there this conflict going on? So initially, there were about 500,000 acres that were dedicated to the wild horses. But if we listen to and we're going to hear the news report from the officials that work and control the land management, right? They're saying that, well, there's too many horses on the property, on the land, and the population has to be decreased. And you're saying that there aren't too many horses, there's too much cattle, that they've actually taken back 267,000 acres. So let's unpack that a little bit of what's going on there and how that's been developed.
Yeah, absolutely. In the original Onaqui herd area where they were present in 1971, there were over 500,000 acres of legal land, and then they decided to what they call zeroing out or not manage for on over 260,000. So that was leaving only about 240,000 as so-called herd management area. But then the problem is that they assign an extremely low appropriate management level, which is not even genetically viable. And even
explain that a little bit more.
Because I'm a member of the World Conservation Union Species Survival Commission, and the equid specialist group that deals with horses recommends 2,500 for viability in the wild. So if you have a number that's only 166 on average of an appropriate management level, that's far from being a viable population. And I saw a lot of Spanish Mustang out here, and they're amazingly hardy breed. And to just gut this herd and take it down to just a very low number, and then to interfere with their reproductive ability is setting this wonderful herd up for decline and demise.
Okay, again, let's stop there. Tell about because we don't know about the reproductive, what they're doing. So let's go into each of these things. Go ahead and talk about that, though. What are they doing?
Yeah, they're darting them with PCP, and I know that quite a few people that are wild horse advocates advocate for PCP, but I, as a scientist, I've looked into it. I've written articles, and I've shown that it causes a lot of serious problems, both for the individuals and the populations. For example, one of the most serious things is that over the generations, it undermines the immune system, because those mares on which it works most effectively are those with the weaker immune system. And that's just plain scientific fact. And why these advocates continue to ignore this is beyond me. I think it's because the BLM forces them to be between a rock and a hard place, and they just say, oh, well. But I think we have to be really fighters here and fight for truly viable levels and for a reduction in the sheep and the cattle that are given practically all the forage. They're given about 90% of the forage allocation, and that's just contrary to the law. And they go and they pressure the congressman, and they tell them a lot of distorted information. So we have to stand up. Those people who really care about these wonderful animals living in nature have to stand up against the lies. And that's what I've done all my life. I've stood up against the lies since I was a boy. And my family actually knew and worked with Wild Horse Annie, the original, who spearheaded the law to protect them. Yeah.
Wonderful. So you have been doing work over the years.
Yeah.
And we want to show your website and also your where people can donate to your work, because
that would be wonderful. I have a reserve design proposal because, as an ecologist, I put together what should really be happening, what would be the true implementation of the law. So you can find that on my website, The Wild Horse Conspiracy. And I've written a book called The Wild Horse Conspiracy. It's had a big effect. And my first book had a foreword by Wild Horse Annie. It was called Wild Horses, Living Symbols of Freedom. When I was a student. And recently I produced a little 60-page booklet calling for the restoration of the herds. And I want to tell people that under the Code of Federal Regulations. Okay, that's all right.
Hang on for a second. You're going to get a chance to say all that, but we don't want to overload people with information. And we do have a request here, and I want to let her know for sure. Yes, Patty Jackson, we will be providing in the links, and I'm going to start doing that in a few minutes, all of the names and phone numbers for people to make those phone calls. And please, folks, Craig is so excited, and he's really passionate about this. He's been working on this. You've been working on this for over 40 years. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe. Yep, absolutely.
And we have a really nice audience here today, and I want to ask that audience to please take action now. Start making these phone calls. I'll be showing, I guess the most important ones for you to call right now would be or contact is the BLM Utah. I'm going to leave that up for a few minutes. And then the President of the United States. Let Mr. Joe Biden, our president, know that it's not okay to override acts of Congress that have been made. I know he's not in charge of overriding Congress, but he has the power to do something about this. And Congress did pass an act called the Wild and Free Roaming Horses and Barrow Act, and allocated 507,681 acres, and 267,000 of them have been given away to cattle ranching and sheep herding. And this is not right, and we want it stopped. We want an injunction, and we want this stopped. Is that right, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. Because actually, under the current population, before they started this roundups, there would be 480 acres for every individual wild horse. That's not an overpopulation. But when they take it down further, if they take it down to their appropriate management level, they'll be like over a square mile per, 1.5 square miles or so per individual wild horse. I mean, that is almost a wild horse empty ecosystem. That is just outrageous. And do they think people are so stupid that they can't think about relative proportions and think in quantitative or mathematical terms? I mean, who are they kidding? Who are they kidding? We have to be really on this and not act like a bunch of people that just let things slide. And so that's why I and a lot of others are really dedicated to turning things around. And I think we have to insist that they get the fair share of their forage and that the livestock be reduced so that they can have their fair share and have truly viable populations that will permit them to survive in the long term and not just go into a decline or become a mere token dysfunctional herd.
I'm getting requests to post in the comments, so I'm doing that right now. Craig, talk a little bit more about what, because you've touched on it, how they contribute to the ecosystem and how not only does it affect the horses, but it affects human beings, affects the environment. It hurts everyone. Can you talk a little bit about their contribution?
Well, I was pleased to see that my article on carbon sequestration was published yesterday. And that's a major point, that they can help greatly combat global warming. And that has to do with their different digestive system, which is a post-gastric cecal digestive system rather than a multi-stomach rumen digestive system, and which, by the way, emits enormous quantities of heat-trapping gases, whereas the horses have a simpler fermentation system that actually locks up carbon in the soils for greater lengths of time. And they also are capable of handling coarse, dry vegetation that becomes tinder for these catastrophic wildfires. And in many cases where they've gone in and helicopter rounded and gutted the herds, shortly thereafter, there are enormous fires. And that occurred, for example, in Twin Peaks up in Northeast California, where they gutted the herd, took about 2/3 of the horses. And then shortly thereafter, they burned one of California's greatest fires happened that burned, over 315,000 acres. And that's happened in many areas in the Red Rock.
Let's look at a video and what'll help illustrate this. Actually, what I want to show is the news media.
Of Land Management has spent the last few days rounding up wild horses, part of Utah's famous Onaqui herd. BLM says the famous herd has grown to an unsustainable size, but those against the roundup say that is simply not true. In the early 1970s, the Bureau was tasked with controlling and sustaining wild horse populations across the western U.S. They set standards for how many wild horses a given area could sustain, taking into consideration the other animals like livestock, which also depend on public lands for grazing.
Our population is over the appropriate management level. The appropriate management level for this area is between 196 and 210, and we're vastly approaching 500 with this year's foal crop.
Well, Ashley Avis, founder and president of the Wild Beauty Foundation, that's a nonprofit dedicated to protecting wild horse populations, says Some helicopter roundups can be extremely physically demanding and even deadly for weaker horses. She and her team say if the BLM took a different approach to managing wild herds, these types of roundups would be avoidable.
Invexi presents.
Well, that to me, the one thing that stood out in my mind is, thank heaven, the news media is finally giving a voice, and I'm grateful and grateful and grateful to the animal rights activists there, and presented the story very, very, very transparently, showing that the people that are there to protect the animals are actually working for the interests of animal agriculture.
And you see, they don't tell about the squeeze play that goes on when they set the plans, and how those vested interests go in and pressure the officials to do a very unfair allocation of population and forage and even water, whereas they kind of turn a blind eye to the fact that the ranchers or other uses are monopolizing the resources. And there's a terrible problem out there with with vehicles too, that are ruining. They're not addressing that, but they'll focus on the wild horse.
I just want to jump in for a second here and say that we invite the Bureau of Land Management on at any time, and that we do understand we're not being disrespectful or attacking the employees. We know they're doing their job, and like you just said, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on these officials. But Craig, can you explain that a little? I want to go a little deeper. You're giving us all these wonderful nuggets, so much information, so grateful for it. But I want to we're not informed as much, and I would love to just jump in a little. Tell how they put pressure on them. What is
so much depends on the Congress, and if the Congress passes a poor plan that puts the wild horse and burros on the bottom of the totem pole, even in their own legal areas, contrary to the law, then it's up to the public to change that. So we have to get congressmen and senators to stop this so-called path forward and get a wild horse and burro restoration, both population and habitat restoration plan, instead of this present wipeout plan, because it's very deceitful, and it's one of the most corrupt programs in our nation as far as defying the true intent of the law. And they have the authority to do what's right. And if the officials had been truly behind the law and promoted it among the ranchers and the general public, there could be a wonderful program here that would bring in great ecotourist dollars, because these horses are majestic and people love seeing them. It really does something for them. Just to know they're there, or to go out and see them, it just sort of like elevates their life. And the fact is that they restore ecosystems. They're natural gardeners. They restore soils. They restore the humus content because they have a different digestive system. They move around a lot, so they don't camp like cattle do on water sources. And in general ways, they enhance and increase the biodiversity, the species diversity. The problem is that people have gotten used to scapegoating them simply because they're not a hunted species or an agricultural species. So they act, blind. They turn a blind eye to all these wonderful positive effects. And studies have actually shown that these animals help the ruminant, cloven-hoofed ruminants. They balance the ecosystem and can make an ecosystem much more productive.
So the cloven-hoofed ruminants are the cattle? Who are the
the cattle, the sheep, the deer, the elk.
Which we want to see more deer and elk and less cattle, because isn't it true that the cattle don't belong there, at least not in the numbers they are, right? Cows. Let's call them what they are. They're cows.
It's nothing wrong with the cattle or sheep themselves. The problem is that people foist unnatural numbers on the land, and they rig it to make it produce to a large maximum degree. And they often totally slight other laws that are so important. I tell you, today we're in a real crisis with global warming. And one of the key ways of combating global warming is to restore natural ecosystems, because they will balance and heal. But we have to let the animals and plants show us. We have to show them some respect. Not the typical arrogant human way of saying, hey, I want this instantly, therefore I'm going to like rig it all and kind of alter the whole system. No, we have to learn respect. You have to have some humility with nature and let it do its thing. Let the horse be itself. And that's what was so beautiful about the Wild Horse and Burro Act, is it allowed these wonderful animals who have done so much for humanity to truly be themselves and be wild and free and naturally living, and to have a habitat.
Craig, who do we have to thank for that video?
That was Tina Wooten, a really fine photographer, and she did so much. She's very dedicated to these animals, and she says, let's stop this roundup. It's so outrageous. She's been out there a lot, and just great. But, that's right near the Pony Express monument and near the Simpson Springs campground, and it's showing there was plenty of forage for these horses, and they were in great shape too. So when they say there wasn't enough forage and they were declining, that wasn't true. I didn't see any seriously declining horses. Practically all of them were about 5s in the body condition score. And just amazing examples, and so vital and interacting there. And it was kind of, really sad to think that practically all of them would be taken, and it's now going on. They're now being taken.
I think one of the biggest questions people have when you say the horses have been taken is, where are they taken? And I don't want to not get that out there. So please, let's talk about what happens to them. Where are these horses? They've taken 200 horses. I did look on the website, and I noticed that it said that some of them were sold and one was released. That was as of yesterday, looking at the Bureau of Land Management website.
Right.
But generally, I understand that some of them actually get into the meat industry in other countries, because, of course, we're not allowed to sell horse meat here, but that it does make that some of these horses, unfortunately, make it into that unfortunate system.
Yeah, what happens is once the people who adopt them gain title after a year, or if they decide that they're saleable after being offered for adoption 3 times or being over 10, they can end up going to these kill buyers, not people that give them loving homes, and because they get the title, and they had this incentive program, and there was a big New York Times article by Dave Phillips exposing that these people were getting $1,000 to adopt a horse, but as soon as they were getting title, they were selling them on the open auction, and which mainly goes to the kill buyers. So they're actually going over to Mexico and Canada to a gruesome death, a horrifying death, terrible betrayal. Yeah, and that was exposed. So these rounded up horses, they go to Delta holding facilities in Utah and Axtell, and then they try to adopt them out. They process them.
I need to stop you for a second and remind you that we don't want to name any particular facilities, because we can't verify that, and it may be so, but we need to not name any particular ones. But it does happen, it is going on, and there is proof of it.
Well, that's just what the BLM does all the time, been doing that for many years, sending it to these centers. Now, these are centers run by the BLM. They're not kill centers, you know.
Right. But
Right.
as you say, once a horse is sold, and maybe some of these horses do wind up in okay situations, but okay by whose terms? They belong in the wild. Imagine having yourself or your family member ripped away, come in your home, take you out of your home, and sell you into slavery. And that's basically what happens.
Absolutely, yeah.
Best home.
They suffer PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, the rest of their lives. And many of these horses go into a deep depression, and some of them just die. They give up the ghost. But a lot of times, even when a person that resembles a cowboy or a helicopter noise comes over, they go berserk. That's how serious it is. These are really suffering, like veterans that came back from a terrible war. And, you know, the law says to treat them with respect and not to capture, brand, or subject them to any other abusive form. Yet our government is institutionalizing this. That's why I thought about all the education I had. And I said reserve design, whereby you design a reserve so they fill their niche. It's bounded by either natural or artificial barriers. It's a complete viable habitat for a viable habitat population. You let the animals fill their niche and establish mature social units or bands, and then they automatically self-stabilize because the older horses train the horses and they suppress reproduction before they're mature. It's just a beautiful, well-ordered system that shows respect. So my project is called Reserve Design. I have a GoFundMe, and I am methodically proceeding on this year after year. I go to different areas and do studies, and I give that to the government, whether it's the BLM and Forest Service. And so please go on my website or go on the Mustang Reserve Design GoFundMe and help me realize this important project. And I've worked with all kinds of people on this.
Okay, let me show the people watching. Here is the actual page for the GoFundMe for Craig, and I am going to pop that right now. If you guys want to jump over there, I'm going to pop that into the comments for those who want to donate. But certainly, if you can't donate, you can share out. You can. The most important thing is to call, donate, of course, if you can. Call now and complain. Call the president. Put all of the put up all of the letters you can and let people know what's going on. Share this out. That's what you can do. If you can't donate, you can still take action right now, and we need you to take action right now.
Yeah, it would be the true realization of the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burros Act, Reserve Design, because it would show respect for the wild horses and burros and their place in nature. Unfortunately, the whole system has been infiltrated by people who actually don't believe in wild horse and burros. They think that the only good burro or horse is a slave burro or horse, or a companion burro of horse, but they turn their back on the naturally living. But, you know, any animal is much more natural than it is man-made. And so it just seems, the whole thing is just very annoying to me. And I will always, as long as I have clear vision, I will always protest this attitude toward these wonderful, magnificent animals. To me, they're highly evolved beings. They're a group of magnificent beings that just deserve our respect and that make life worth living here on our planet Earth.
I want to talk a little bit about natural resources and the water supply in a moment, but let's show them one more time, Wild and Free. And I wanted to
That's beautiful.
mention here what you said here on number 7 in your document. They are extremely hardy and able to survive on poor forage and to withstand extreme climate conditions. These are exactly the horses that need to remain in the Onaqui mountain, HMA, given the changing climate. So actually, we probably need more of them, and we're reducing.
Yeah. We do. I mean, they will show us how many belong there. I mean, it's certainly more than one horse for every 480 acres. That's a ridiculous figure. Yet that was the present figure before they started the roundup. And so now they want to bring it down to like one horse for every, I forget, it was a mile and a half or something square, 1 square mile, just some ridiculous figure. And unfortunately, there's a lot of fences within that HMA that restrict the horses from going and accessing the full forage. And another thing that's going on is in certain areas, they're stripping the juniper trees down in order to favor more forage for the livestock. And that, with this global warming, that'll bake the earth and turn it into a hard pan. So I was very alarmed to see that. Another thing is they have to assure adequate water, and remember that these ranchers have a privilege of grazing that is cancelable, and they have to share, because this is true multiple use. We don't want to see monopolistic use on our public lands, but restoring the horses to a truly viable population in the 1,000 or more would be true multiple use, because you have to take the big picture on all the public lands, not always reduce the scope or the scale of what you're considering. And so we have to have true defenders of the wild horses and their habitat. It all goes together. Viable habitats for viable populations, and not just minimized populations.
Let's look at another video here.
Little kings have water. I need to get this for the...
Wow, all those animals. So what happened
was
was
they turned it off. Someone turned the water off for a few days, and they were desperate. They were desperate because someone turned the water off, and the BLM should have been monitoring that and not allowed that to happen. As I said, the people that monitor that every year have told me that often happens. That when the livestock ranchers pull their cattle or sheep out, they turn their water off and they put the wild horses in a bind. Now, the BLM should be on top of that and not allow that to happen. The Onaqui is one of the most famous and appreciated herds in our nation and in the world. People come from all over to photograph it, and they have a lot of, I noticed a lot of Spanish colonial traits. And that's what you were talking about earlier, about a very hardy type that can survive in face of dire conditions, such as are happening now with a warming earth. So those Spanish colonials are really an ancient race that is a real hardy race. And so we don't need to gut the herd and take, 2/3 or 3/4 of them and then disrupt all their social structures and and set them back in these trying times. We need to leave the population alone. That's why I'm calling for a halt today to the roundup. They shouldn't take any more. They've taken enough. Let's stop it, and let's stop the whole so-called path forward. Let's call a moratorium on these roundups. And I'm in touch with several of the herds, and I've done these ecological evaluations and reserve design proposals, also on the famous Sulphur Mountain herd just to the south of the Onaqui, also in western Utah, and that's a very pure strain of Spanish colonial wild horses. Yet they're planning in September. They're planning to helicopter round up that and take it down to a ridiculously low level.
So
And
what
I'm
you're
calling for
saying,
that one to be stopped, of course, in all.
so what you're saying, Craig, is that people need to take action because this isn't only going to happen this one time. And for people just tuning in, I want to let you know that I'm here with Craig Downer from the Wild Horse Conspiracy. He's an author. He's an ecological scientist. He's been studying this for 40 years. He's been presenting information to the Bureau of Land Management. And again, we invite them on at any time to dialogue about this, but we are asking, and he is asking, for the halt of the roundup. And we are asking you, the viewers, to make that phone call, do that email, just take action now. The information is available to you in the comments, on the screen, at the ticker, bottom at the ticker, you can see it. It's available to you at Craig's website, wildhorseconspiracy.org. And Craig, what else do you want to tell the audience?
Well, to take an interest in individual herds and to get to know them, go out and observe them and make sure that you give input, that you're registered to give input to the BLM or the Forest Service plans. And to mention one, the Hebers down in the Apache sit graves are under a dire plan now, which would practically eliminate them. And they're one of the ones that has been self-stabilizing. So give input to that Apache sit graves National Forest on the Hebers, or take an interest in the Sulphur Mountain herd in western Utah through the Salt Lake City, Utah, or take an interest in the Ely herds, Ely, Nevada herds, which are some magnificent herds, but have terrible plans for them. Or here in western Nevada, where I live, take an interest in the Pine herd or the Clan Alpine herd through the Carson City BLM. There's just so many opportunities wherever you go. Go on the blm.gov Wild Horse and Burro website, and then learn where they are and go out and become involved, and also for the burros, because the burros have been terribly treated and assigned very either zeroing out or extremely low numbers. And Arizona has a lot of burros. They're really precious animals. And remember, all of these are deeply rooted in North America. Their ancestry has been here for millions and millions of years, and that's for the entire horse family. This is its cradle.
I want to jump in for a second, Craig. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a knowledgeable person. But when I look at the land where the horses are and the grazing and so forth, how beautiful. Now, I love sheep, but I don't want to see sheep. Sorry. I don't want to see sheep, poor shared sheep, where there should be a natural reserve. It looks like it's been just like buzz cut.
Well, exactly. I mean, the sheep already get over 90% of the public lands. So in the few, about 12% of the public lands were wild horse and burro declared legal areas, where the wild horse and burros were supposed to be the principal recipients of the forage and the water and whatnot. Well, why give them 90? Why give the sheep and cattle 90% of the forage in the wild horse and burros legal areas? That's contrary to the law, just basically. And it's us public who have to insist on it. We have to, really stand up and kick and scream and say, hey, this isn't right. We care. This is the law. It's a general public interest, and it's a quality of life issue. And it's also very practical because these animals are very important to maintaining the integrity of the life community or ecosystem in our world today, which is being jeopardized by pollution and habitat destruction. And we want it restored. And by the way, a scientific article, such as I indicate in my recent carbon sequestration article, which I'll share with you, prove that the horse is one of the best animals for restoring degraded ecosystems in many places throughout the world. And there's eminent ecologists who have done very elaborate studies maintaining just that and proving that that is the case. So please stand up, take an interest. It's not just all about our immediate creature comforts. I mean, there's a great satisfaction that comes with identifying, learning about, and standing up and seeing nature restored, including the true nature of these wonderful naturally living horses and burros.
And I want to just direct people to your website right here, the wildhorseconspiracy.org. You can go to Craig's website, check out all this information, his white papers, his reports, his writing for over 40 years of study of this subject, and his warning, which is the most important, his warning to us that it is not just the horses that suffer. And I know our audience are a very compassionate audience, and they care about the horses. But we have to convince the rest of the population who says, who cares, just a bunch of horses,
Yeah. I really appreciate how your audience practices what they preach by not eating certain products like meat and that are directly related to this monopoly of the public lands. And it also involves mining and energy fracking, that sort of thing. Like say, I can give a special deal, like a packet deal. I also have a musical CD on the piano of my original melodies, 13 that describe aspects of the wild horse. These are just melodies that came to me. And so I can make a special deal with my booklet, my musical CD, 45 minutes, and my book here also,
Yes.
and even my earlier book. If you could contribute to, and it's a tax deductible donation, just go on my website or communicate with me, and we'll I gotta keep the funding going to keep my projects going.
Absolutely. So here's the website that you can go on and check out, and you can purchase the book. You can purchase the CD. I'm going to be doing that today. Make my contribution, and that money is going to go help Craig maintain all this work he's been doing for years, and it's super important. He needs your support. We also need very much so for you to contact the president, to contact the Bureau of Land Management. So please take those steps if you haven't done that yet today as well.
Yeah, I also offer speeches. I have a wonderful PowerPoint on the Wild Horse and Burros of America, and one on all the order of the horse, tapir, and rhino. I also goes along with a speech on the world's endangered species. So just keep me in mind for opportunities. Be glad to come and speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Craig, we're just about wrapping up here. Is there anything, last things you want to say to, I guess people, it's pretty much obvious in what we presented. The proof is in the pudding. You can see what happens.
Yeah. I just say don't compromise away the true and central rights of these wild horses. Read that Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burros Act carefully. And I have several pages of all the legal points there, because there are several other laws too that should be protecting them. If you read the intent purely, and that's in my book, The Wild Horse Conspiracy, and also in some of my articles are on my webpage, and just learn them and insist that they be applied and not forgotten about. Because what's happening is there's too many selfish and greedy people who try and ram their way through in our society in order to profiteer on the public lands resources, just for short-term so-called advantages, but they are ruining our world. And we just can't continue this. It's a vital life and death issue, and we must stand up now. And the horses are our great allies in this. As before, they bear the burdens to do the hard work. And believe me, they are healers of the land and healers of the life community. So respect these wonderful heavenly, I call them heavenly gifts, because they will do it. They will save life on earth if we let them, just as so many other of nature.
Putting it back into balance, allowing nature to put itself back into balance. We have Tracy Allred saying, keep up the good work. She's actually calling every day and writing every day, and that's wonderful. And we all should.
So many people are at it every day. It's just they're so passionate about it, and I too.
And of course, Jane Unchained is a conservation and anti-animal agriculture network. We believe that veganism is the answer to a lot of what is going on with the climate, and stop eating meat. Yes, you weren't.
Yeah, Nicole Rivard, she's written some great articles for Friends of Animals.
Yes, we don't do wool either. We have such wonderful technology. We need to upgrade our technology. Did you know there is some good news though? We have the first sushi restaurant made from lab meat is opening, I believe, in France this week. So for people that can't help but eat meat, I don't understand that, because I'm vegan and I feel great. And I've been vegan for 6 years. That would take a huge bite out of the problem. Because let's face it, these people are there to make a living, and they're doing it any way they know how possible, but it's destroying the earth, and we need to change what we're doing from the ground up.
We can't be followers of blind tradition. Blind tradition, blind habit will lead you blindly over a cliff. And unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening today. We are spirits, and we have volition. We can change, we can rationalize, look at what's happening, and take steps. We can imagine better ways of life and much more harmonious ways of life. And I believe that it involves looking beyond just the materialistic too, to the higher planes of reality.
That's right. Very well said. I agree with everything you said. And we do want to ask everyone again to please make that phone call. Please write that email, and don't quit. We're going to have you back on again, Craig, when we want an update. Okay. We're not going to forget about this. We're not going to go away.
No, I want to save that sulfur, and I want to stop these roundups, because this is atrocious. The path forward is a deceitful plan to undermine one of the best things that America and the world has going for it, which are the wild, naturally living horse and burros and their rightful, viable habitats, which are guaranteed by the law. But it's us people who must see the law is enforced.
Right. We have one more article that we didn't share, that just kind of to wrap up these stories we wanted to present. And it just corroborates what you said about the horses. Spotlight on the overlooked role of the horses as carbon sequesters.
So I was so pleased to see. I got this late last night that my article was published on, and this is a very scientific article, and I received some support to do this as a contribution to my organization through the Love Wild Horses organization there in the Bay Area. And so I have all the sources, and please read this and share it, because they lock away carbon, and there are major combaters of global warming, which is so urgent today. And by the way, a fire just broke out yesterday where I am, and I'm breathing a lot of smoke now. I have the filters on, but look at the weather, look at the extreme storms. Hey, wake up, people. We can't just have business as usual. We have to learn to curb our excessive ways and learn to respect nature, respect its cycles, respect all the plants and animals and decomposers that make life possible. You know, it took millions of years for life to establish itself on Earth and on the land. And we got to respect that, you know, and just tune in to the wonderful natural world, because it's very uplifting too, and in a spiritual way as well.
It took millions of years, but it isn't taking long for us. We're heading very quickly into our self-destruction if we don't turn around.
Yeah, and it isn't, you know, it isn't just people that are being that are in menace, but unfortunately the whole life community. You know, we could leave, if the Earth is becoming an oven, which it appears to be, then there wouldn't be any life left. It would be an inert planet like Venus. Now that happened to Venus, you know, and now it's thousands of degrees with swirling storms. Well, that's a lesson, you know. Think about it. We can't let that happen. We want to stay here for a long time yet and have a beautiful existence among all the plants and animals and soil organisms and the sea, creatures of the sea and the rivers and the lakes. You know, it's beautiful. We're here for a reason. And as I see it, this is sort of a place of experimenting and evolving spiritually, being here on the earth.
Giving the opportunity to do that. And certainly we want to see the earth continue, and it is down to an issue of that. So I just want to remind everyone, thank you so much for watching this show. Thank you for making those phone calls and sharing out this video, clips of this video. I will be sharing this out. One of the things I do is make sure that the stories go out continually on all the platforms possible. And you can do so much activism by just doing the same. Even if you take a clip out of this and send it off on Instagram or send it off somewhere else, you are from your home doing performing digital activism, which is amazing and is so powerful. And as we have seen, Craig, things are beginning to slowly change. The media is paying more attention. So our voices do count. How we spend our dollars count. And it is the taxpayer dollar that is paying for this land. It is a national reserve. It belongs to the people, not the cattle ranchers, not the sheep herders, not anyone else there for commerce. It's there as a reserve, and it needs to be preserved.
Yeah, and there was a big rally on July 2nd. I was there, where there was major speakers. We mentioned that earlier. And that was a real success, you know, really got a lot of media attention. We have to keep that up. And then later there was a rally in Washington, D.C. the following Friday. And then many of the people went out to the Onaquis, and they were photographing, observing the wild horses. We have to keep it up, you know, not rest on our laurels. I mean, we're just getting the momentum going. So let's make this a major priority in our lives, that we're going to change this wild horse and burro situation. We're going to restore the herds and their habitats, and the people who are used to monopolizing the public lands are going to have to learn how to share, you know, because we're teaching them a good lesson too, as our brothers and sisters.
Eliminate animal agriculture for time, because that doesn't appear to be a sustainable.
Yeah, plant-based is perfect, is very healthy. As a matter of fact, as you know, there's a lot of serious problems with eating so much animal products.
Or eating any
for health-wise, and for, of course, for the ecosystem of the earth. It's terrible. It was on the news last night that in the Amazon, they've been cutting down the last of the rainforests to put cattle and raise crops. And now the Amazon, many areas are becoming instead of carbon absorbers, they're becoming carbon emitters and contributing to global warming. Boy, I was so upset about when I heard that on the PBS NewsHour last
Setting
night.
fires.
Yeah.
We've done.
It's drying out, and our beautiful redwood rainforest could dry out and become just harsh desert-like chaparral country. It's time to act, to make this and it's been proven that the horses, if they're released into a lot of these areas, will prevent the wildfires. There's a big area up there a couple of years ago called in Northern California and Southern Oregon, where they had about 1,000 horses, and there was a big fire called the Multnomah, and it did not catch hold wherever there were the horses.
Wow.
Because they didn't have the dry tinder, the lightning strike or the cinders did not catch hold. And they had a wonderful relationship going with the juniper trees. They took down the lower branches so it didn't form a ladder and go up and have a crowning fire. There was an elaborate study done there, by this Wild Horse Fire Brigade, showing that is true. And they're advocating for deploying all the horses that have been unfortunately rounded up in many areas where they can be real lifesavers and save homes and ecosystems.
So you were saying they would be re-releasing them. We want them to.
Yeah, that's right. And they have a measure now they're trying to support. Unfortunately, they have certain aspects where they're calling for the abandonment of the actual legal areas on the BLM and Forest Service lands. I would never advocate for that. We've got to fight the good fight.
It's certainly a very complex issue that we have.
The people have to learn how to share. In other words, the solution to greed is not more greed. You don't bow down and care. Cater to a person just because he's a big, demanding, selfish person. You have courage and you stand up and you say, hey, that's not right. I'm not condoning it. I'm not going along with it. And I will fight you on that because it's wrong. And we have to learn how to share with these wonderful, by the way, they're national heritage species. They're national heritage. So remember, 50th anniversary, let's restore the true intent of the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burros Act. Thanks so much, Lindsay, for having me on again. I'm glad to come back again.
Sure thing. Well, folks, there you have it. We need to make these phone calls. We need to stop this. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with another story of what's going on in the animal world and how you can help. So see you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.